It's time for the whole 9 yards. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ralph Ventre. I'm doing fine, and it's week 9 in the FCS season. Yes, that rhymes. 3 Northeast Conference games. Central Connecticut is on the bye. We have a featured game of the week on ESPN3, 2 games on Front Row. I'll tell you all about them in our opening drive. These 2 teams earned victories in the Steel City last week. This Saturday, they move east to Fairfield, Connecticut, where Duquesne and Sacred Heart will clash head-to-head on Campus Field. This matchup features 2 of the NEC's top 3 rushing teams. The Sacred Heart Pioneers paced the circuit with 188 rush yards per contest. We'll talk more specifically about Duquesne's rushing attack later on in the show. Another area where these 2 teams excel is on third down. Duquesne and Sacred Heart 1 and 2 on the NEC leaderboard in third down conversion percentage. If you plan on tuning in to Front Row to watch this one, you'll get to see one of the most efficient passers in the FCS, Duquesne quarterback Tommy Stewart, 5th overall in passing efficiency rating. He has 21 touchdown passes to only 4 interceptions this year. The Sacred Heart secondary, which played the role of hero in last week's win over Robert Morris, will look to slow down the vaunted Duquesne passing attack. It's an important conference contest. Both teams riding high off emotional victories. We'll see who has the upper hand. Sacred Heart hosting Duquesne, high noon, Fairfield, Connecticut. Next up, we examine the Robert Morris at St. Francis matchup. Both teams are looking to rebound after league losses in Week 8. As far as the entire season goes, these 2 teams find themselves on opposite ends of the turnover spectrum. St. Francis Red Flash have the best turnover margin in the league. Meanwhile, Robert Morris, -11 for the season. However, in Week 8, it was both teams suffering from costly turnovers. Robert Morris was hurt by 2 second-half interceptions, including the one that Kamal Whitaker returned for the game-winning touchdown in the final minute. Then, as for St. Francis, the Red Flash had a lead and were driving for more until a costly fumble turned the tide, allowing Duquesne to take control in last week's 24-7 decision on the Bluff. If you're a fan of good play in the defensive secondary, you'll want to tune into this matchup Saturday. Both teams feature well-accomplished, talented safeties. For Robert Morris, you have Ryan Richards Jr. and Andy Smigera. On the St. Francis side, it's Alondo Boyd and Hakeem Kennard. Both pairs of defensive backs have sensational playmaking ability. They both come up and defend the run well, and they are key components of fine defensive units. Check them out when Robert Morris visits SFU Saturday, NEC Front Row. Now for the NEC Game of the Week on ESPN3. Bryant and Wagner will meet on Grimes Hill, with both teams looking to break into the NEC win column. For the visiting Bulldogs, they lead the league in offensive plays run this season, as well as first downs. Starting quarterback Price Wilson, more than 2,300 yards passing already this season. That's 6th overall in the football championship subdivision. As for the Seahawks passing attack, they lost their opening day starter, a preseason All-NEC pick, Alex Thompson, for the season due to injury. But that loss hasn't prevented the Seahawks from success in the running game. Wagner has 2 of the NEC's top 7 ranked rushers, Ryan Foles and Denzel Knight, both with 6 rushing touchdowns apiece. Tune in to ESPN3 and find out who can grind out a victory on Grimes Hill. Paul Dottino, Kevin Gilbride, and John Schmelk will have the call live. Kickoff 12 noon Eastern Time. NEC football on ESPN3. Another clean opening drive in the books. Now we take a look at the NEC stock market, whose value is on the way up this week. Well, I promised you that we'd speak a little more in detail about Duquesne's rushing attack. One of the reasons why the Dukes have been so successful of late, well, it's the return and production of sophomore running back A.J. Hines. Hines, of course, missed 2 games in the middle of September. Despite only 5 appearances this season, he ranks 4th on the NEC rushing leaderboard with 464 yards. He has 3 100-yard rushing performances, and these last 2 weeks, he's been especially effective, eclipsing the 120-yard mark each of the Dukes' past 2 victories. Most recently, in the win over St. Francis, Hines went for 160 yards from scrimmage. The Dukes ran the ball better than any other St. Francis opponent this season. A.J. Hines had a lot to do with it. His stock is on the way up. I'm ready for my Twitter timeout. This week's tweet comes courtesy of Sacred Heart head coach Mark Nofri. Give him a follow on Twitter if you're not following already. Obviously, Coach Nofri is rather excited and pretty happy about the result the Pioneers pulled out at Robert Morris last week after missing the potential game-winning field goal with under a minute to play. The Pioneers hung tough on the road. The defense made a big play as Kamal Whitaker's pick 6 proved to be the difference. It evened Sacred Heart's record at 1-1 in conference play. Now the Pioneers have a prime opportunity to face NEC preseason favorite Duquesne at home in Week 9. This week, there is plenty of reason for Coach Nof and Shoe fans to get excited. Omaha, Omaha. It's time for the NEC Audible. First, some sound from Bryant's James Perry, who's preparing his team for Wagner's offensive speed and the Seahawks' blitzing defense.
You know, I've seen them both sides of the ball. They can move the ball. They're aggressive on offense. They have some really good speed. So that'll be a challenge for us, and those are areas that we need to continue to do well. And then on defense, they're, you know, one of the more blitzing teams that we'll see all year. You know, maybe with the exception of St. Francis, the most. So that'll be a good challenge too. They're a 3-4 front who is pretty multiple and gives you some headaches that way. So it'll be really critical that, you know, we have a good week of practice getting ready for all those things so that we can play our best.
As for Wagner's head coach, Jason Hotelling, he's impressed with Bryant's offensive talent, and he also reminds us not to underestimate special teams.
A very good football team. You know, you look at last week against Central, I believe it was 17-14 at the end of the third quarter. So just a talented team, well coached. You know, offensively they can put a ton of points on the board. You know, they go fast. They get the ball to the playmakers. You know, obviously they beat Fordham this year up at their place. So just offensively, a very talented group. I think defensively, they do a great job up front. You know, 4 down front, and they really do a nice job of getting off of blocks, playing their responsibilities, running to the football. You know, so both sides of the ball, and then special teams. You know, their return game obviously last year hurt us big time, and they got some players there as far as the special teams go. So all 3 phases, I think they're well coached. I think they run to the ball on defense. I think they run a lot of plays on offense and kind of stress your defense in that way. So looking forward to a competitive environment up here on the hill, but just excited to get back playing again.
That's amazing. You know, it really is when you're talking about the Duquesne run defense. The Dukes are on a 6-game win streak, and coincidentally, the team's run defense has been more than stout during that span. The Dukes have allowed only 590 rushing yards during the 6-game win streak. Breaking it down further, opponents are averaging barely 3 yards per carry. When looking at Duquesne's last 4 games, the Dukes are allowing only 8.5 points per game during that stretch, and opponents are rushing for just 2.76 yards per attempt. It's a 6-game win streak bolstered by a stalwart rushing defense, opponents averaging barely 3 yards per carry, and quite frankly, stats amazing. It's time for a little DYK knowledge. Did you know it's been 9 years since the Northeast Conference's last unbeaten champion? You have to go back to 2008 when Albany went 7-0 during Northeast Conference play. Every NEC champion since then has had at least one league loss, and in 6 of the last 7 years, the NEC title has had multiple recipients. So if you don't know, now you know. It's not easy to put together a perfect Northeast Conference season. So thank you for joining me as I've set you up for Week 9 on the gridiron. 2 games on NEC Front Row. Bryant at Wagner in the NEC Game of the Week on ESPN3. Don't forget to join us next Tuesday as we recap the action with the Super 7. Thank you for joining me today for the whole 9 yards. This has been a presentation of NEC Front Row, and I'm Ralph Ventre.